Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 3, Episode 18. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. I have my buddy John on to recap the 2023 Stanley Cup Finals, and although I am loath to do it, I did feel compelled to make a comment about this classified documents case against one Donald J. Trump. If you like the podcast, if you like what you hear, please thumbs up, like, 4 stars, 5 stars, write a review, send far and wide. If you like what you hear, dear listener, please consider supporting This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Thank you all for listening. I do appreciate it. Let's go.
Act 1 NHL Stanley Cup Recap and Implications for the Future of Hockey.
Back to do a recap of the 2023 NHL playoffs, including the ass-kicking that was the Stanley Cup. One Jonathan Caesar. Jonathan, say hello to the 12 people who listen to this.
Well, it might even be 13 if my girlfriend tunes in. Good to be on the show again. I always appreciate it. And I think we'll have some riveting discussion here.
Well, I don't know if it'll be riveting, but it will certainly be detailed because I know you and I both have a lot of opinions on what happened in the Stanley Cup between the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights. First and foremost, that I'll start it off. I didn't see the defensive team from the Florida Panthers. I didn't see the forechecking team from the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup that I saw in the Eastern Conference that I saw from the Florida Panthers, particularly the way that they manhandled Toronto. I thought that Vegas did a really good job at handling that type of pressure, at playing that same type of game with Florida, and then frustrating them by doing a lot of very effective dumping and chasing so that Florida never really had a chance to get their forecheck going on the other end of the ice. And let's just be clear, with as many goals scored, you can't say that Bobrovsky had the same type of series in the Stanley Cup that he had in the Eastern Conference, particularly the Eastern Conference Finals, right?
Yeah, anytime you give up 26 goals in 5 games, that's sort of a problem. Can't believe they left Bobrovsky in the last game as long as they did. It's kind of strange. But first off, big congrats to Bruce Cassidy. Obviously, I'm a big Boston Bruins fan, and he is the ex-Bruins coach that they released last year. So maybe that was God working a wonder there. He definitely deserves it. The whole organization has run incredibly, and congrats to Florida, too. It was an awesome run. But like you stated, you can't hit what you can't catch. it a lot of times in that series, it just looked like a college team versus a pro team. I mean, Vegas had 0 injuries, aside from being, on their 5th or 6th goaltender, who played really well. But they were just bigger, faster, stronger, quicker. And it was just an assault that. When you have that many, I've never seen a team ever in the NHL that deep with that many lines, except for the Boston Bruins in the regular season of this year. I think it would have been a much better series if the Bruins were playing them. It would have been a much better matchup. I think that's the one everybody wanted to see. But, Florida just had no answers. And when Vegas came out in that first game and was, they had a lot of scrums after the play and everything. They were not intimidated at all. They weren't playing into any of that. But I mean, they took the physicality right to Florida right off the get-go. Obviously, Tkachuk got hurt. He had a sternum injury. They were kind of keeping that low key. And I think some of their other main guys were hurt too. But top to bottom, Vegas, 4 solid lines, 3 solid defensive lines, solid goaltending. I mean, there's just no weakness on the team other than they don't have the greatest power play in the regular season. They did okay in the playoffs. So that really was the cornerstone to the victory.
Yeah, so you noted something that I thought was interesting, that I know a couple people who are Vegas fans. They lived in Vegas or they live in Vegas, and they like to note that it would have been a blowout throughout the course of the playoffs if they had had any of their starting goalies. And you can use that word plural. They went through so many goalies, and the goalie that was in, Hill, played very, very well. So
yeah, he overskates his post a little bit, but the team is so good. If you noticed that second chance opportunities for Florida were not very many, and
Right.
there were a lot for Vegas because they're just stronger. But whenever Aiden Hill did make a little bit of mistake, he made some. He had the best stick save in NHL history in that first game. That was unbelievable, and a pretty sick glove save in the last game. But the Knights did not allow the Panthers to descend on Hill like Florida had done in previous series. The game that they won, that Florida won, they were able to do some of that.
yes,
Get some second chance shots and things like that. But one thing that people don't really know who don't follow hockey really well is Bobrovsky is really good at the low stuff and scooting his pads around. Up high, not so great. And if you watch a lot of those goals, they were up high. You saw Vegas miss the net several times. That's because they were shooting up high. So I thought one of the keys to the whole series was the amount of screen shots that Vegas was able to do. They scored. As a matter of fact, they won the game one because of goal from the defense from the line. But they had so many opportunities, hit posts, and goals from screen shots where Florida's goalie could not see what was going on. And that's what the Bruins did not do with the Panthers. They didn't take enough shots defensively, and Vegas really did. I mean, they were awesome. They really played well, Vegas. They had, the first game, I think they had 5 different goal scorers.
right.
So that again, it's just a testament to the coaches and the whole system.
I believe that the most important point there that you made is strength. All the teams that we've liked over the years, namely, of course, the Detroit Red Wings, I'll always go back to their Stanley Cup run. One of the things they did so effectively was keep people away from the crease in their own end. When shots were being thrown around, they were able to clear the puck generally quickly so their goalie wasn't facing multiple shots, yet they did the exact opposite on their opponent's end. They're always able to put bodies in front of the net. Thomas Holmstrom, the absolute hero of that Red Wings team, that he took such a beating. They had several guys who would just take a beating in front of the net, but they would never leave. And it made the goalie's angle always much shorter. The goalie didn't have a clear view to see what was happening. Everything's obstructed. And so the goalie is always reacting a second late. Even if the goalie's in a good position to make a save, those rebound shots can be so dangerous. And that takes strength. You can't just stand in front of somebody else's net and take that beating unless you are physically strong and you've got a system that employs this strength to allow. It's like a center in basketball. A center in basketball is going to get pissed off if they go down into the paint every time and the guards or the forwards can't get them the ball. So they're not going to want to stand in that paint and take that beating time and time again. So you've got to be able to give them the ball to get them active so they'll continue to go and stand right next to the basket. Same thing in hockey.
Yeah, if you watch, you can even go watch replays, but the breakout speed of the Knights is incredible. It's just if a shot is missed or blocked, they're just instantly back the other way, full force, the whole team. I think honestly, Florida had one solid period that they dominated. I think it was probably the second or third period of the game they won in overtime, and that's really it. Other than that, and then the last game was pretty much an embarrassment. I don't know what happened. I don't know if Florida just gave up or what was going on there, but they kind of looked timid, out of sync, and again, I think several of them were hurt. So it's just not the right matchup. But physically, if you just look at the size of the Vegas players comparatively, a lot of them, especially their defense, it's just, there's just too much reach Too fast, like I said, too big, too strong, not injured, incredible skaters. It's just again, when you play hockey and you can't ever get a relief, and it's just one line after another, and that's not traditionally how hockey used to be. But I think it's probably going to start heading that way because it's really starting to work. So we can talk about that, but this was proof that hockey overall is changing. But I really, as I predicted from our first show, I really thought Vegas would make it, and they did. Obviously was hoping Boston would have been there, but they weren't. But congrats to the Knights. So.
Yeah, congrats to the Knights. I think you're right. I don't know that it's necessarily new. I think those great Avs teams could roll 4 lines at you. The Red Wings teams could roll 4 lines at you. The current dynasty, if you will, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they won a couple of Stanley Cups and they went to 3 in a row, I believe. They could roll 4 lines at you. It's just rare that you can put together a team where your third, but particularly your fourth line, has enough talent that can play on both ends. Because when you and I were growing up, the fourth line was for every team a grind line. It was guys that probably, but for the fact that they could grind things out and were very tough and physical, they wouldn't be in the league. And now you've got guys who are playing on the third and fourth line. They go to some of the worst teams in the NHL. They're probably playing on the first or the second line. So that's certainly something that is changing. The only other comment that I wanted to make before we move on is that I thought Florida, for as undersized as they physically were, you could see that, like you said, on the television screen. These guys are not as big. They did play very close to Vegas until they didn't. I mean, if you think about it, the first game was very close until the third period. The second game was a blowout. The third game, Florida wins. Vegas wins the fourth game, and I believe it was the third period. There was that spell. But last night, it was that second period. It was at the end of the second period. It was only like a 6 or 7 minute stretch, and Vegas scores 4 goals. So Florida played close as much as they could, given the blitz that they were under. But they had these spells where you could see the better team in Vegas, and it wasn't close. I mean, Vegas was scoring 2-3 goals in those stretches, and the series got out of reach. One of the things that you and I have talked about, the evolution of hockey, the silliness that is having a hockey team where it's 116 degrees, and that's where it is right now. There's 2 different teams in cities now where they can get up to 110 degrees. So let's talk about what you see as the future of hockey and some of the things that perhaps the NHL is going to have to address. If they don't realize it now, it will be in the future. I think there are so many talented players now in the league. I don't know that it's going to be rare or unique that a team like Vegas runs 4 lines at you. There may be several teams with, of course, a competent general manager that are going to be able to do that. Your thoughts?
Well, here's the issue, because all the teams with superstars were bounced out of the playoffs. So when you're looking at it from afar, are you going to keep doing that? Have these huge contracts, and what do you do with a player like that? Maybe a desperate team brings someone in and pays them a ton. I'm not saying you can't. It's very hard to have 4 solid lines and 6 solid defensemen and a good goalie if you're paying one player $8, $9, $10, $12 million a year. It's just the economics don't work. So, all these Southern teams, they're not going anywhere. I mean, they're building a new arena for your team, the Coyotes out there in Tempe.
It got voted down.
It did? Okay. So, but Tampa's not going anywhere. Florida's solid. Vegas, obviously. I mean, these teams, it's not like they're going to just pack up and move up north. That's not going to happen. It's just weird because I think the NHL kind of needs a Northeast team. I hate to say that, or a Canadian team to be in the final. It just helps the brand. There's a lot more people that live in those areas. We've seen the same thing with baseball. when you get like the Astros versus the Dodgers, well, do you think the Northeast cares about that matchup?
No.
So there's things that should be done for hockey, obviously since it's a cold weather sport. I think it's fine if one hot weather team is in it, but when you have two, it's just a little weird for the overall scene. But I don't know, if I'm the general manager and I'm putting a team together, or I'm, my team was bounced at the start of the playoffs and I've got a couple high dollar guys on my team. That's you got to start thinking about that, because all these teams that made it through are not structured that way. I don't even think you need like the best goalie anymore. That used to always be a big thing. And Bobrovsky's contract with $10 million a year or whatever. I mean, I just don't think it's necessary. If you've got a bunch of good players and a solid couple goalies, I just think that's the way to go. Honestly, I mean, it's the systems are so in place now, and the science behind the whole thing, that I think you could go that way. But you better be, have some good draft setups and good contacts with Europe and things like that, because that's the only way you're going to be able to do that.
Is goalie now in the NHL like running back in the NFL?
Well, I think the key is to have two of them. I like the way the Bruins did things this year, where they had, for every 2 games, the first goalie plays, the other one plays one, just something like that. I think obviously when you get to the playoffs and one's hot, that's fine. But keep in mind, they had a lot of rest, a lot of breaks on some of these between series. And Aiden Hill's a pretty young guy. So there's that factor too. But I don't know if you need the big high dollar goalie anymore like you used to. The guys are all bigger. They're kind of cut from the same frame. You don't see many of those smaller guys anymore. You just roll in with the depth chart, and the solid 6 defensemen is just the way to go.
I agree. And I think that's more important, or as important, than having what you would call your traditional number one goalie. The thing about running backs is they get hurt so often, and paying one such a large salary when generally you need someone to spell a number one running back in the NFL. It just doesn't make economic sense. And as much as these sports now are personnel based, they're monetarily based too. You've got a salary cap in the NFL, you've got a salary cap in the NHL. You've got to be able to spread the money around. And it's almost like you said, if you get too top heavy with the talent and the money, then you've got a team that really needs 2, 3, 4, 5 of these above average players. You just can't afford them. And if you don't have this massive contract for 1 or 2 guys, you can go out and balance the team much better. It's almost as if, because Vegas was an expansion team and they got that draft lottery, that they were able to basically take key players from other teams, and they didn't have a ton of what you call number one pick talent on the team. That helped them over the course of time with their balance. So,
well, of course, and they've only missed the playoffs once in 6 years, and that was barely. That was last year. And they've made it to a finals already. The Capitals beat them. And then they were, fairly dominant this year, and obviously through the playoffs. So, yeah, it's kind of good that the league allows a new team to do that so they don't, falter. But, on the flip side, again, would you want to be the team who either got bounced early in the playoffs or didn't even make the playoffs with a couple of rock stars on your team, but it's not producing? Because, when we're talking about the goalie situation, if you have to be good, outstanding goalie and get paid a lot because your team doesn't clear the crease well or doesn't clear the slot well, or you don't have a good overall defensive scheme, then you would have to pay that goalie a lot, or that goalie's going to have to make so many saves that you're going to wear him down. I prefer, and I think it's smarter to have the system as a whole flow better, like we saw with Vegas. And I just think it's going to open a lot of eyes to people in the league going forward.
Agreed. And all the leagues are copycat, one team does something successfully, everybody looks at mirroring that in order to try to replicate the success.
Yep.
So what else about the future of the NHL strikes you based on these playoffs?
I just think I liked it. It was fast. It was hard hitting. I like the fact that it was physical. I like the fact that the refs did a solid job. I mean, there was not a bunch of crummy calls. They let them play. That was great. Again, I think it's just strange because when you get down to the wire, you're like, where are all the superstars? The guys that are on Edmonton and some of these other teams that, in Toronto, like, the guys that are on the front of the Nintendo games and all, or whatever it may be, the big time people, you just didn't see that at the end. And I don't know if that is good for brand awareness or not, because you're so used to basketball,
right?
Not as much this year, but seeing the superstars, the NBA was a little crazy too, the way that worked out. But baseball, football, who's there at the end? Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes. You know what I'm saying? And you just you didn't have that. So I guess it's a testament to it being a true team sport. But if you're going to do that, then, the league has got to marketing wise, you've got to change the branding a little bit, because, if you can't fall back on any main guys, that's going to make it a lot trickier when, especially certain markets, when you're trying to obviously attract the attention for viewership, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly would like to see.
That was not a great product, obviously. When you're watching it, you're like, this is a kill. What is this? So that was just a little strange, I think.
I've always said that, there need to be more teams in Canada and there need to be more teams in the Northeast, that having an original 6 team in the NHL Finals was always good for the product. And the Boston Bruins have been one of the original 6 teams that have permeated, the landscape of the NHL over the course of the last 10 years. Because of expansion, because of, the way the economics of the league work, some of those original 6 teams have been slow. I know my Red Wings in particular have. They've been slow to be able to adopt a modern approach to the NHL. Do you think there's any solution to that, or is this just two old guys talking, and the league looks the way it looks and is going to continue to progress, where you're going to see teams from Carolina and Florida and Dallas and Las Vegas, LA? These teams are going to be as much a part of the landscape moving forward, regardless of whether or not anybody in New York or Boston or Chicago care, and regardless of whether or not anybody in Toronto or Montreal are watching.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one good thing about hockey is hockey fans love hockey. So, I'm sure most of Canada was still watching, that play. And obviously you pick up a lot of the global market, because these guys come from all over the world. I would love to be in some of those meeting rooms compared to you and I growing up, what that looks like now, because I guarantee you on a very micro level, that goes so deep with these players from when they're kids growing up from all over the world, that you better have the best farm system, the best scouts, the best talent seekers, the best off-ice training. If you don't have that, and this hockey, unlike other sports, it's a 365-day deal. They're not taking much time off at all. So that's the other thing. These guys are handpicking these athletes from a very, very young age for all these, elite leagues and college level and junior leagues, and literally going globally. That's just kind of how you have to do it. But it would be nice to see. I'm sure a lot of people were hoping, maybe even the league, that Edmonton and and Boston would face each other in the finals because they did so well in the regular season. But hey, when it came down to it, Vegas had a good structure, an awesome coach, and it just worked. But it would be nice to see some Canadian teams back in there. In New York, Boston, Philadelphia, some stuff like that. I'd like to see that get back to those glory days.
So would I. Well, I appreciate, as always, you coming on the show. It's a pleasure to talk hockey with such a hockey fan, and one that I can remember yelling at the TV with and guffawing at some of the great hockey fights that we watched. So I fully intend on having you back on in but a short 4 months or 5 months, and we can do a preview of the 2023-2024 season.
Sounds good, because we're certainly not talking about the Red Sox this year. So
you didn't hear me mention the Mets, did you? So the dog days of summer are here, and so are the lull Mets. All right, buddy. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Act to the classified documents case against Trump.
Let's say you grew up in Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica. You come to this country legally. You got a work visa. Of course, if you're Puerto Rican, you just come to this country. You start working. And you find a job at a luxurious hotel. It's not easy work. There's a lot of very difficult jobs at a luxurious hotel property. The people can be ostentatious. That's $1,000 word for saying that they're douchebags. May sometimes say and do things that are demeaning, disparaging. Yet, the work is steady. You've got a lot of coworkers that you really enjoy working with. And the tips, when they come, are phenomenal. Joe Biden and his IRS may want to put a stop to it, but the tip industry, right, for beauty and health care, for food service, for bars, for hotels, it's very lucrative for the people who work there. It's not easy work, but it's very lucrative because you're getting these cash tips, and to the extent that you're going to report them to the IRS, well, just like the mob, you're shaving some off the top before you're going to report anything. And by some, as we all know, I mean all. Well, you go into work one day, and there are a ton of boxes littered all over different areas of the hotel. And you are instructed to work with someone that you've never met before to move boxes from point A to point B, from point A to point C, from point Y to point Z. You're moving boxes all over the hotel property, and you know what? You could care less. Just another day that ends in Y, that you're at work and that you're doing the work that is being asked of you that needs to be done. Months later, someone that, again, you've never met before, someone that you've never seen before at the property, they come and they start asking you about those boxes. And they don't tell you their name, and they don't tell you why they're asking. They have very specific questions about those boxes. They seem to know a lot about the whole box, quote-unquote, incident. You may or may not question why you're being asked about it. And that person tells you, I am with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I want you to tell me everything that you know about these boxes. Well, what do? You going to tell them no? Go to hell? You're going to invoke your rights? You're going to go hire a lawyer? No. You're not in an economic position to do that. And for most people, educated people who've lived in this country all their lives, gone through all of the civics classes that one could ever ask for, 99 out of 100 are going to immediately cooperate with law enforcement. So you tell the guy about the boxes, or you tell the girl about the boxes. Well, not 90 days later, maybe 120, maybe 180 days later, you and some other people are asked to move some of the boxes, not all of them, some of the boxes that were taken from point A and were deposited at point B, and you're supposed to take those boxes from point B to point C. Now you may think to yourself, wait, are these the same boxes that I had moved and that somebody came and asked me about? The person that was asking you about them isn't there. You're getting an instruction from somebody that you've never met before. You don't see at the property that often, but clearly is a position of authority. This is a person in the know. It's another day that ends in Y and you're working. You move the box or boxes from point B to point C. You don't think anything more about it. This time, rather than someone coming and asking you about these boxes, they actually are wearing FBI jackets. They've got a badge around their neck and they are just busting in. They are breaking down doors. They seem to know where they're going and they ask you directly, hey, remember us? We asked about the boxes. Did you move any of the boxes from point B to anywhere else on the property? What are you going to do? You're going to stand up and invoke your rights? You're going to tell them that you're going to lawyer up? No. You say, yeah, I moved 1, 2, 10, 50 boxes from point B to point C. You really never had any concern as to what was in the boxes, why they were there, why you were being asked to move them, why you were being asked to move them again, and maybe again and again. It's just part of your job. You're just going to work. Now step back, dear listener. Step back. Really consider what we just went over. Put it into perspective, the totality of the entire circumstance. Even though I didn't use names, you basically just have characters. This is exactly what happened at Mar-a-Lago when Trump took all of the documents from his time as president and stored them in and around the property. This is what happened moving these highly classified, confidential documents containing state secrets. This is how the quote-unquote crime was perpetrated. Now, I do use quotations around the word crime. I'm not saying that what Donald Trump did with regard to taking these documents and then lying about the extent of the documents that he had, and instead of turning them back over, trying to hold on to them, I'm not saying that what he did was right. I'm not trying to make a comment about the legality. I could do that. It's been done 10,000 other times. You can get that ad nauseum in other places. For the purposes of this segment, it is a crime. It can be prosecuted. The reason why I put it in quotations, there have been countless other officials in Washington, D.C., namely Hillary Clinton, that have misrepresented the nature of their handling of classified documents to the FBI. No one's ever been prosecuted. If you are a high-level state official, you're not going to get prosecuted, even where you misrepresent the nature of what happened, the facts. If Donald Trump had handed over the documents to the Department of Justice, to the FBI, this would all be over. Trump did not do that. He instructed his team specifically not to do that. And he knew that by not turning over the documents, that he was committing a crime. And when we roll all that together and put this all into perspective, you really get an understanding of how haphazard and dim-witted and just plain stupid the entire Trump presidency was with regard to how he managed his affairs on a day-to-day basis, how he managed the White House. Trump, in committing this crime, in withholding these classified confidential documents with state secrets, regardless of what was in them, he enlisted people who had absolutely no ideological leaning, had absolutely no investment in what he was doing, and in fact were some of the most vulnerable of the population of people that he could have enlisted to help him. This really hasn't been focused on, I believe, in the national news media narrative. It's usually just an aside or it's tangential to the crux of the story, which is what might have been in those documents and what was he thinking and what were his motives. You see, if you take a step back, if you look at it from below instead of above, you see Was there really a motive? Many of the documents, I have heard people in a comedic sense, in a satirical sense, say, hey, Trump probably was sitting there looking at a document. It had a nice graph. He liked it. He thought that it made him look good. And he was just like, I'll take that document. Some of his motives may have been more petty. Namely, General Milley and the whole Iran situation where Trump wanted it to be known that he never prompted the Pentagon, the military, to formulate a plan to attack Iran. That just spilled out of my mouth curiously. That rhymed, didn't it? Didn't mean to. He wanted it known that he stopped the attack that the military wanted to perpetrate on Iran. And damn it, he's going to keep all the documents that he can that he believes justifies what he did, that he's in fact an American hero and not this wild barbarian. Do you think any of those hourly workers at the Mar-a-Lago property were privy to that motivation? The media wants to focus on the principles that were working under Trump, and yet, to me, the story is so obvious in its buffoonery. Who moved all the boxes around? Who was doing the actual physical labor of, quote-unquote, hiding these boxes? Because, as we saw from the indictment and the photos that were included, these boxes were hiding in plain sight. Nixon had the plumbers. He had people specifically inside the White House that were doing all of these things, all this dirty work. But if it came to doing physical labor, if there was elbow grease needed in any situation, they didn't outsource that. Whether competent or incompetent, your opinion of the principles is irrelevant. They at least had the wherewithal to say, we need everyone who's involved in this to be ideologically committed and to understand what we're doing. We can't have people who really have no idea what our goals are, what we're trying to accomplish, and ideologically opposed to it. We can't have those people inextricably tied to the substance of the elements of the crime. How hard of an investigation is it when you've got the weight of the entire Department of Justice and the FBI coming down on hourly workers who may be on work visas from other countries in the Mar-a-Lago universe, coming in and saying, hey, did you move these boxes? When? How many times did you move them? Where are they now? If this is some sort of window into the Trumpian world, there's only really one conclusion. To go down all these rabbit holes of motivation and psychology, it's just a waste of time. Look at how it all went down. It's just plain stupid. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.